Seats like this aren't for people like you. Vanessa Whitmore said it with a laugh soft enough to sound polished and loud enough for half of first class to hear. Her champagne flute tilted carelessly in one hand as she blocked the aisle with her designer carry-on and a smile that had practiced cruelty down to an art. Then the plane gave a small shift under the boarding bridge. The crystal rim tapped her wrist, and pale gold champagne splashed across Dr. Nia Carter's white silk blouse in a bright, ugly stain that spread like a spotlight. A few gasps slipped through the cabin. A phone lifted 3 rows back. Someone whispered, "Oh no." Vanessa did not apologize. She looked Nia up and down instead, taking in the tailored cream suit, the quiet posture, the dark skin, the composure, and somehow deciding all of it offended her. "Well," she said, curling her lip, "I guess that outfit was too ambitious anyway." The cabin went still in that strange first-class silence where everyone hears everything and pretends not to. Nia Carter stood in the aisle without moving, one hand still wrapped around the handle of her leather briefcase, the other resting lightly at her side. She did not look at the stain first. She looked at Vanessa. Not the diamonds, not the champagne, not the smug tilt of her chin. Vanessa herself, like she was reading a line of numbers nobody else could see. A young flight attendant near the galley froze with a stack of linens in her arms, caught between training and fear. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "I'm sure we can get something to help with that." Vanessa gave a little dismissive wave, as if the mess had happened to a seat cushion instead of a person. "It was an accident," she announced to the watching passengers, already building her version before anyone else could speak. "These aisles are so tight, and she came up here so fast." She emphasized she just enough to let the sentence do the ugly work for her. Nia still said nothing. That silence pulled more eyes toward her than any argument could have. Across the aisle, a man lowered his tablet. In row 1, a woman slowly removed one earbud. Another phone appeared, angled discreetly over a cashmere shoulder. Vanessa noticed the attention and leaned into it. "Honestly," she said, adjusting the cuff of her blazer, "some people should know when they're overdressed for where they're actually supposed to be sitting." The flight attendant's face tightened. She glanced at Nia's boarding pass, then at seat 2A, then at Vanessa's bags sprawled across 2A and 2B like a private kingdom. Nia finally lowered her eyes to the champagne stain blooming across her blouse. Her expression did not crack. If anything, it became calmer, more precise. She reached into her handbag, removed a folded handkerchief, and dabbed once at the silk with the same control someone might use signing a contract worth more than the plane itself. Vanessa laughed under her breath. Unbelievable. That was when Nia's gaze shifted past her, briefly, to the monogram on the luggage tag attached to the garment bag in the overhead bin. W. Capital Partners. Then to the manila folder sticking 2 inches out of Vanessa's tote. Then back to the ring on her finger. Then to her face. When Nia finally spoke, her voice was soft, level, almost kind, and somehow that made the entire cabin lean closer. "Vanessa Whitmore," she said, as if confirming a detail she already knew. The smile on Vanessa's face faltered for half a second. Just half. But it was enough. Because in that instant, before the plane had even pushed back from the gate, Nia Carter stopped looking like a woman humiliated in public and started looking like someone who had just recognized exactly whose world she was about to turn upside down. The air inside first class changed after Nia said Vanessa's name. It was small, almost invisible, but everyone felt it. Vanessa straightened in her seat and gave a brittle laugh that landed wrong even to her own ears. "Do I know you?" she asked, though the confidence in her voice had already thinned. Nia did not answer right away. She took the fresh linen the flight attendant offered, thanked her softly, and blotted the silk once more with unhurried care. That calm did something worse to Vanessa than anger ever could. It made her seem loud. It made her seem careless. It made every pair of eyes in the cabin drift from the stain on Nia's blouse to the expression on Vanessa's face. The flight attendant swallowed and tried again. "Ma'am, I can help move your bags so Ms. Carter can take her seat." Vanessa's head snapped toward her. "Excuse me?" Her smile sharpened. "I am comfortable where I am, and I am not moving because of a little misunderstanding." She turned toward the nearest passengers as if gathering a jury. This is exactly what happens now. One small accident and suddenly everyone acts like you committed a crime. The words floated there, polished and poisonous. A man across the aisle looked down at his hands. A woman near the window kept filming, no longer pretending to check a message. Nia remained standing, her briefcase still steady at her side. Her posture too composed for someone who had just been embarrassed in public. "Seat 2A is mine," she said. Her tone was clean and simple, with no strain in it at all. "Your belongings are on both seats." Vanessa let out a breath through her nose and crossed one leg over the other, her heel catching the cabin light. "There are empty seats in business class," she said. "I am sure one of them would be just fine." The flight attendant's face went pale. She glanced at Nia's boarding pass again like she wished paper could solve cowardice for her. "Ms. Whitmore," she said quietly, "Dr. Carter is assigned to this seat." Vanessa's eyes narrowed at the title, and for the first time there was calculation in them. Doctor. Not because she respected it, but because she was measuring what kind of woman still refused to shrink. Her gaze dropped to Nia's blouse again, then rose slowly back to her face. "Well," she said softer now, "if she is really so important, I am sure she can wait another minute." Nia watched her in silence. That silence had weight now. Not passive. Not wounded. Exact. The kind that made careless people start talking too much just to fill it. And Vanessa did. "My husband is on this route all the time," she said, brushing imaginary lint from her sleeve. "We do business with half the people who matter in this country. Aviation, private equity, federal consulting, logistics, you name it." She smiled at the flight attendant without warmth. "So let us not turn this into something ridiculous over a glass of champagne." The moment the words private equity and logistics left her mouth, something behind Nia's eyes sharpened. It was so slight most people would have missed it, but the woman filming in row 3 lowered her phone. Just enough to stare. Nia's thumb brushed the edge of her briefcase once. Then she looked directly at Vanessa and asked, very gently, "Whitmore Capital Partners still handles the Eastbridge acquisition, correct?" Vanessa went still. Not dramatic stillness. Real stillness. The kind people cannot fake because their body forgets how. Her lips parted, but no answer came. The flight attendant looked between them, confused. Somewhere behind the curtain, an overhead bin slammed shut. Boarding noise continued in the distance, but inside first class it felt like the whole plane had stopped breathing. Vanessa's confidence did not disappear all at once. Cracked. A hairline fracture running through polished glass. "Why would you know anything about that?" she asked. Nia tilted her head, almost thoughtful. "That is what I was wondering about you." And just like that, the balance shifted again, not loudly, not publicly, not yet, but enough for everyone watching to understand that whatever story Vanessa thought she was controlling had just slipped out of her hands. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it again as if the answer had changed shape somewhere between her throat and the air. The confidence she had been wearing since boarding no longer fit as neatly. She reached for her champagne flute, realized it was empty, and set it down with more force than grace. "I think you are confused," she said finally, her voice recovering just enough polish to sound rehearsed again. "My husband is involved in dozens of deals. That does not mean strangers get to throw around company names to sound important." Nia did not move. The cabin lights caught the faint gold stain still drying across her blouse, but somehow it no longer looked like humiliation. It looked like evidence. "You are right," Nia said softly. "Dozens of deals, but only one Eastbridge acquisition. Only one private equity firm desperate enough to overpromise logistics integration before regulatory clearance." The woman in row 3 lowered her phone all the way now, no longer hiding that she was listening. The flight attendant stood frozen beside the armrest, linen still folded in trembling hands. Vanessa gave a short laugh that felt brittle around the edges. "That is boardroom gossip. Half of Manhattan thinks they understand a merger because they read one newsletter and had 2 martinis. She leaned back, reclaiming her posture by inches. "Let me guess. You have a friend in compliance." Nia's expression did not change, but her eyes did. They settled on Vanessa with the calm of someone who did not need to guess at anything. "No," she said. "I have signatures." Silence dropped again. It was not the first silence of the morning, but it was the first one that cut. The businessman across the aisle slowly closed his laptop. A teenage gate upgrade passenger standing just beyond the curtain stopped, pretending to look for overhead space, and simply stared. Even the usual boarding chatter from the jet bridge seemed to pull farther away. Vanessa's fingers curled around the edge of the armrest. "I do not know what game you think this is," she said, each word more careful than the last. "But if you are trying to intimidate me, it is not going to work." Nia finally shifted her briefcase from one hand to the other. The motion was small, precise, and strangely final. "I am not trying to intimidate you," she said. "I am deciding whether this was carelessness or character." That landed harder than if she had raised her voice. Vanessa blinked. For one brief second the mask slipped, and underneath it was not outrage. It was worry. Real worry. The kind that appears when a person realizes the room has stopped reflecting back the version of them they prefer. She turned toward the flight attendant with a sharp, practiced smile. "Can we please stop this nonsense and get ready for departure? I am sure this woman can be compensated for her blouse." The word compensated hung in the air like perfume that had turned sour. Nia glanced down once at the stain, then back up. "It is not the blouse." Her tone remained level. "It is the assumption behind it." The flight attendant looked as if she wanted to disappear into the galley wall. "Ms. Whitmore," she said quietly, "I really do need to ask you to clear seat 2A. Vanessa did not move. Instead she looked at Nia with a new kind of focus, colder now, more alert. "Who are you?" she asked. No mockery, no performance. Just the question stripped bare. Nia let the moment stretch. She could have answered immediately. Everyone around them expected her to. But she seemed to understand something Vanessa did not. That truth arrives harder when people have to wait for it. Her gaze drifted once to the garment bag in the overhead bin, then to the folder still visible inside Vanessa's tote, then back to the diamond ring resting on the hand gripping the armrest too tightly. "Someone your husband should have warned you about," she said at last. Vanessa's face lost color so subtly it might have been missed if half the cabin had not been watching for exactly that. Her hand moved toward her phone. Not casually this time. Urgently. And Nia saw it. Of course she saw it. She saw everything. That was when she stepped half an inch closer to the row, lowered her voice, and asked the one question that made Vanessa's hand stop cold over her screen. "Did he not tell you who controls final approval?" Vanessa's fingers hovered over her phone, but she did not pick it up. Not yet. The question had landed too precisely. Around them, first class held its breath in that tense, polished way only expensive spaces can, where nobody wants to stare and nobody can look away. The flight attendant shifted her weight, clearly sensing the moment had turned into something far larger than a seating dispute, but still too uncertain to step into it. Vanessa gave a brittle smile that showed no warmth at all. "Final approval for what?" she asked, and the effort it took to sound casual made the sentence even thinner. Nia watched her for a beat, reading the panic, trying to hide behind posture and jewelry and old habits of being protected by other people's discomfort. "For Eastbridge," she said. "For the logistics restructuring. For the signatures your husband has been promising investors for 3 straight weeks." The businessman across the aisle inhaled softly through his nose, the kind of reaction people make when a private name becomes public in the worst possible way. Vanessa's chin lifted. "You are bluffing." She said it quickly, as if speed could make it true. "Richard does not answer to strangers on airplanes." Nia did not smile. That made it worse. "No," she said. "He answers to the board. And this morning, the board answered to me." The words settled over the cabin like cold light. The woman in row 3 slowly lowered her phone into her lap, not because she had lost interest, but because this no longer felt like gossip. Felt like witnessing the second before a chandelier falls. Vanessa's lips parted, then pressed together. Her hand finally reached for her phone, and this time she unlocked it fast, with none of the performance she had used earlier. Her thumb moved over the screen, searching for certainty. Nia saw the contact name appear reflected faintly in the dark cabin window beside them. Richard. She also saw there were already 2 unread messages above it. Vanessa tapped the thread. The first message had arrived 6 minutes earlier. Call me now. The second had arrived 2 minutes after that. Do not say anything else on that plane. Nia did not need to lean closer. She did not need to. Vanessa's face told the whole story before the words finished sinking in. The color drained from her cheeks so gradually it felt almost elegant, which somehow made it more humiliating. Her polished confidence did not collapse in one dramatic moment. It leaked out of her, through her eyes first, then her mouth, then the stiff line of her shoulders. That does not mean anything, she whispered. But now even she did not believe herself. The flight attendant looked from the phone to Vanessa to Nia, finally understanding that one woman had been protected by appearances and the other had been protected by facts. Nia shifted her briefcase onto the empty seat for half a second, reached into the outer pocket, and withdrew a slim black folder. No flourish, no threat, just paper. She opened it and glanced down once, as if checking numbers she already knew by heart. Your husband requested emergency clearance at 8:14 this morning, she said. He asked for accelerated approval before market open. He did not get it. Vanessa stared at the folder like it might bite. How do you have that? The question came out raw now, stripped of class and volume and all the polished varnish she had boarded with. Nia lifted her eyes. Calm, exact, unmoved. Because I chaired the review meeting. The words were not loud, but they changed the cabin more completely than shouting ever could. Even the flight attendant straightened. Across the aisle, the businessman who had stayed silent this whole time gave Nia a look of sudden, unmistakable recognition. Vanessa saw that too, saw the shift in him, saw the respect, saw where the room had gone. Her grip tightened around her phone until her knuckles paled. You could have said that earlier, she murmured, but there was no accusation left in it. Only the weak shock of someone realizing she had mistaken restraint for powerlessness. Nia closed the folder and rested it lightly against her briefcase. You could have apologized earlier, she said. Then she looked at seat 2A, at the bag still spread across both cushions, and back at Vanessa's face. Now move your things. Vanessa did not move at first. She sat there with one hand around her phone and the other gripping the armrest, as if still hoping the room might reverse itself and hand her back the version of reality she preferred. But the cabin had already changed sides. Not openly, not cruelly, just completely. The flight attendant stepped forward at last, voice careful but firmer now. Ms. Whitmore, I need to prepare the cabin for departure. Please clear both seats. Vanessa blinked, then looked down at her bags like they belonged to someone else. She reached for the tote first, lifted it too quickly, and nearly caught the strap on the armrest. A few passengers pretended not to notice. That was somehow worse than if they had stared. She placed the tote in her lap, stood halfway, then stopped and glanced at Nia again, searching for something she could still use. Sympathy, hesitation, weakness. She found none. Nia remained exactly where she had been. Composed, stain fading at the edges, briefcase balanced against her leg, calm as a closed door. Vanessa swallowed and slid the garment bag down from the overhead bin with stiff, careful movements that had lost all their earlier elegance. This is unbelievable, she murmured, but her voice was no longer aimed at an audience. It was aimed inward now, toward the collapsing architecture of her own certainty. The businessman across the aisle shifted just enough to make space for the bag. He did not offer help. He did not need to. Vanessa tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, then looked down at her phone again. Another message had arrived. She read it, and whatever hope she had been holding shrank further. Her lips parted. Her eyes moved once to Nia, then back to the screen. The flight attendant held out a hand toward seat 2B. I can relocate you there if you would like, ma'am. The offer was professional, neutral, clean. Vanessa's face tightened at the word relocate, because now it sounded like what it actually was. Removal, not by force, by truth. She set her jaw and lowered herself into 2B without a word. The motion was controlled but not graceful. Her tote remained clutched to her side like a shield. Nia waited until the aisle was clear, then placed her briefcase beneath 2A and took her seat with quiet precision. No dramatic pause. No victory in her face. She sat like a woman arriving exactly where she had always belonged. The contrast settled over the cabin like final judgment. The flight attendant exhaled softly, then leaned down. "Dr. Carter, I am so sorry about what happened. Would you like club soda, sparkling water, anything at all?" Nia looked up at her and offered the first warmth anyone had seen from her all morning. "Sparkling water would be fine," she said. "Thank you." That simple kindness, given after everything, seemed to embarrass the cabin more than outrage would have. Vanessa stared straight ahead, but her reflection in the dark window betrayed her. Tight mouth, rigid shoulders, eyes no longer resting anywhere for more than a second. Her phone lit again in her hand. Incoming call. Richard. She rejected it. A moment later it rang again. She rejected that one too. On the third call her hand trembled. Nia noticed, of course. She noticed everything. But she said nothing. That silence pressed harder on Vanessa than any lecture could have. Finally Vanessa turned slightly, just enough that her voice would not carry past the row. "Did he lose it?" she asked. Gone was the sneer. Gone was the performance. The question sounded smaller than she did. Nia folded her hands once in her lap before answering. "Not yet." Vanessa let out a breath she did not seem to realize she had been holding. Relief flashed across her face so quickly it barely existed. Then Nia continued, her tone as steady as before. "But he is about to understand the difference between a delay and a denial." Vanessa closed her eyes for 1 second. Only one. When she opened them again, the cabin door was shutting. Boarding was over. The plane was sealed. No more exits. No more audience drifting in and out. Just altitude ahead and truth trapped in row 2. The flight attendant returned with the sparkling water, placed it gently on Nia's tray, then lowered her voice. "Captain says we are second for pushback." Nia nodded once. Vanessa looked at the cup, then at the stained blouse, then at the black folder resting beneath Nia's hand. Something in her expression shifted again. Not shame this time. Calculation. Desperation trying to put on a better dress. And when she finally turned toward Nia, the smile she forced onto her face was thin, careful, and far too late. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "we got off on the wrong foot." The smile Vanessa forced onto her face did not belong to the woman who had boarded the plane. It belonged to someone standing in the ruins of her own certainty, trying to sound gracious while smoke still curled around her pride. Nia turned her head just enough to meet her eyes, then let the silence stretch one beat longer than comfort allowed. "No," she said at last, her voice calm and even. "You got on the wrong plane assuming the wrong things about the wrong person." Vanessa's smile faltered almost instantly. The engines hummed low beneath the cabin floor as the aircraft eased back from the gate, and the small movement seemed to tighten the air around row 2. There would be no walking away now. No quick call in the terminal. No dramatic retreat into a lounge. Just miles of sky ahead and nowhere to hide from what had already happened. Vanessa lowered her voice further, shaping it into something careful, almost intimate, as if privacy could undo public contempt. "I did not realize who you were." Nia lifted the sparkling water, took a measured sip, and set the cup back on the tray table with perfect precision. "That is the point," she said. "You should not have needed to." The words landed clean. No heat, no sermon, just truth. Vanessa looked away first. Outside the window, the service vehicles blurred past in slow motion. Inside, the cabin had fallen into that watchful quiet again. The kind that grows when people sense the real turning point has not passed but arrived. The businessman across the aisle had stopped pretending to work altogether. The woman in row 3 kept her phone lowered now, but her eyes remained locked on the seatbacks ahead. Even the flight attendant moved more softly, as if afraid to interrupt whatever invisible line was being drawn. Vanessa glanced down at her phone. Another message from Richard had appeared, longer this time. She read it, and Nia saw the change before anyone else did. Not fear exactly. Recognition. The hard, cold recognition of someone discovering that the consequences were not coming later. They were already moving. Vanessa swallowed. He says there is still time to explain. Nia rested one hand lightly over the black folder beneath the tray. Explain what? She asked. That his wife spilled champagne on the chair of the review committee after publicly suggesting she did not belong in first class? Or that he failed to mention who had final authority before sending you onto a plane carrying his negotiation package in your tote? Vanessa's head snapped toward her. It was the first truly unguarded movement she had made since sitting down. You knew about that too? The question came out before she could polish it. Nia looked at the tote bag pressed against Vanessa's side. You kept checking it every 30 seconds before boarding even started. People protect what they think matters most. Vanessa's fingers tightened over the leather strap. Nia continued, still quiet, still steady. The folder sticking out has the Eastbridge markups. Different paper stock than the rest of your documents. Legal tabs. Blue signature flags. Your husband did not trust digital transmission before the vote, so he sent paper with you. Which means he was hoping for a conversation before Wheels Up. Vanessa stared at her as if the seat beside her had turned into something dangerous and precise and impossible to charm. You notice everything, she whispered. Nia did not deny it. The plane paused on the taxiway. A flight attendant's voice came over the intercom with routine instructions, but the words washed through the cabin without touching row 2. Vanessa looked down again at Richard's message, then back at Nia. He wants me to ask what it would take to fix this. That was the first honest sentence Vanessa had spoken all morning, and maybe because it was honest, it sounded fragile. Nia turned toward the window for a moment, watching sunlight slide along the wing. When she faced Vanessa again, her expression had not softened, but it had sharpened into something more dangerous than anger. Decision. The deal is not damaged because of the champagne, she said. It is damaged because disrespect is never an isolated habit. It leaks into judgment, into due diligence, into what people say when they believe there will be no cost. Vanessa's eyes dropped. Nia let that settle before adding the one line that made the air between them go still all over again. So if Richard wants to know what it takes to fix this, tell him the answer is the same as it was yesterday. Vanessa looked up slowly. Nia held her gaze. Integrity. And as of this morning, he is running out of both time and witnesses willing to pretend he has it. The plane turned onto the runway with a slow, deliberate curve, and the change in angle sent a band of sunlight across row 2. It caught the rim of Vanessa's untouched glass, the edge of Nia's black folder, the diamond on Vanessa's hand, and somehow made each one look like evidence. Vanessa sat very still now, one palm flat over her tote, the other around her phone, as if she could hold her world together by pressing hard enough. Nia rested back against the seat with the kind of composure that did not ask the room for permission. She did not look triumphant. She looked certain. That was worse. Vanessa's screen lit again. This time she did not reject the call. She answered in a whisper so tight it barely sounded like her. Richard. She listened for 3 seconds, then glanced sideways at Nia with the reflex of someone checking whether the person beside them already knew everything. Nia kept her gaze on the window. Wing. Tarmac. Heat blur. Silence. Vanessa's voice dropped lower. No, she is right here. Another pause. Her throat moved once as she swallowed. No, I did not know. You never said her name. The businessman across the aisle did not pretend not to hear anymore. Neither did the woman in row 3. The whole cabin had entered that strange social stillness where nobody moved because movement itself felt like commentary. Vanessa listened again, then closed her eyes for half a second. I cannot fix this if you do not tell me what happened in the meeting. That line changed the air more than anything else she had said, because it was no longer the voice of a woman protecting status. It was the voice of someone arriving late to the truth. Nia turned then, slowly, not toward Vanessa's phone but toward her face. Calm, precise, unshaken. Richard's voice was not audible from the device, but whatever he was saying was pushing harder now. Vanessa's expression tightened, then cracked. "You told investors it was done?" she whispered. "Before approval?" A few rows behind them, someone inhaled sharply. Tiny sound. Huge weight. Vanessa looked down at the screen as though the words might rearrange themselves if she stared long enough. Richard. This time his name carried warning, not devotion. "Did you move on financing before clearance?" Nia's eyes lowered once to the black folder beneath her hand, then rose again. She did not interrupt. She did not need to. Vanessa's face was doing the work for her now, each new second peeling away another layer of polish. The plane paused at the end of the runway. Engines deepened. The cabin crew took their jump seats. Seat belts were already fastened, trays already up, but nobody in first class seemed aware of routine anymore. All attention had narrowed to one phone call and one woman who had gone from spectacle to witness without lifting her voice. Vanessa drew in a shaky breath. So that is why they delayed signing. She turned toward Nia. No performance left now, no elegance, no practiced superiority. Just raw understanding arriving too late to be useful. "You were never deciding a delay," she said quietly. "You were deciding whether to stop the whole thing." Nia held her gaze for a beat. "I was deciding whether your husband built a strategy or a trap." Vanessa looked as if she wanted to say something else, something larger, maybe even honest, but Richard was still speaking in her ear. Fast now, urgent enough that his panic could almost be seen in the muscles of her jaw. Then her eyes widened. Not from shock this time. From numbers. Real numbers. The kind that do not bruise pride. They erase it. She lowered the phone by 1 inch and stared forward as the engines roared and the aircraft began its takeoff roll. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a breath. "He already spent money he did not have, counting on your signature." Nia did not blink. "I know," she said, and as the plane lifted from the ground, leaving the runway and every easy exit behind, Vanessa understood the worst part was not that Nia had power. It was that she had been patient enough to let the truth expose itself. Before using it, at 30,000 feet, the cabin settled into that polished hush that only comes after takeoff. When drinks return, laptops open, and people pretend the world below cannot touch them. But row 2 stayed tense, sealed off from the rest of first class by something stronger than silence. Vanessa still held the phone in her hand, though Richard had stopped talking. The call had ended almost a minute ago, yet she had not lowered it, as if hanging on to the black screen might somehow pull her back into the version of the morning where none of this had happened. Nia sat with her hands folded lightly over the closed folder, gaze steady on the cloud line beyond the window. Calm. Unmoved. Exact. The flight attendant approached with practiced softness and asked whether either woman wanted lunch service started early. Vanessa shook her head too quickly. Nia asked for black coffee. Even that answer sounded composed enough to make the air feel sharper. When the attendant moved on, Vanessa finally set the phone in her lap and turned toward Nia with the careful look of someone approaching a ledge. "He says there are people depending on this deal," she said quietly. "Pension funds, regional shipping jobs, expansion contracts. If Eastbridge collapses, it will not just hit him." Nia did not answer immediately. She let the words settle, not because they impressed her, but because she had likely heard versions of them from men like Richard before. Men who wrapped recklessness in urgency and called it leadership. Vanessa pressed on, sensing movement where there was only patience. "He says the market will punish everyone if there is a denial." Nia turned her head then, just enough to meet her eyes. "The market is not a moral argument," she said. "It is a reaction. What your husband did was a choice." Vanessa's mouth tightened. "You do not understand. Once numbers are promised, people move. Banks move. Boards move. Staff moves. If you stop this now, it becomes a public failure." Nia's expression stayed still, but something in it hardened. It became a public failure when he sold certainty he did not possess. The line hit clean. Vanessa looked away, then back again, gathering whatever remained of her nerve. "Then tell me what he can offer." There it was. Not apology. Not reflection. Transaction. Even now, Nia saw it instantly. Her gaze lowered once to the tote at Vanessa's feet, then lifted. That is the problem, she said. You still think this is about leverage. Vanessa flushed, and for a moment the old reflex returned. Everything is about leverage. The words came out before she could stop them. A few heads turned from farther down the cabin. The businessman across the aisle did not even pretend to look away now. Nia studied Vanessa for one long second, and when she spoke again her voice was softer than before, which somehow made it land harder. That is exactly why Eastbridge is not safe in your husband's hands. Vanessa went quiet, not offended, exposed. Outside the window, sunlight flared across the wing. Inside, seatbelt signs remained off, drinks carts rolled, ice clinked, and the ordinary rhythm of air travel resumed for everyone except the two people in row 2. Vanessa's phone lit again with a new message, and this time she read it without hiding the screen. Forward the packet. If she will not talk, give her the revised terms. Vanessa looked at the tote, then at Nia. The move was subtle, but Nia caught it instantly. Of course she did. Her eyes dropped to the bag before Vanessa's hand even reached the zipper. Do not, Nia said. No volume, no threat, just certainty. Vanessa stopped cold. It is only the revised packet, she whispered. He thinks if you see the concessions in writing. Nia's gaze held hers until Vanessa's hand slid away from the zipper like it had touched a live wire. Then Nia reached into her briefcase, drew out her own phone, and unlocked it with one smooth motion. A message already waited at the top of her screen. Board vote moved up. Need final recommendation before landing. Vanessa saw the reflection in the dark window and lost what little color she had left. Because for the first time all morning, she understood the real clock was not Richard's. It was Nia's. Vanessa stared at the reflection of Nia's screen in the dark window as if a single line of text had just rewritten the laws of gravity. Board vote moved up. Need final recommendation before landing. There it was. Not a threat. Not a bluff. Not even a negotiation. Just a clock. Clean. Moving. Unstoppable. The hum of the engines filled the silence between them, low and constant, while first class tried to resume its ordinary rhythm. A glass set down softly 3 rows back. Ice shifted in a drink across the aisle. Somewhere behind the curtain, a flight attendant laughed too quickly at something a passenger said. The sound bright and thin and far away. Row 2 stayed in another world entirely. Vanessa's hand tightened over her tote, then loosened, then tightened again. She looked at Nia's profile, at the stain still faintly visible on the white silk blouse, at the black folder, at the phone now resting face down on the tray, and for the first time all morning she seemed to understand that power did not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrived in restraint. Sometimes it arrived in someone who had every reason to humiliate you back and chose instead to let consequences speak in complete sentences. If you send a negative recommendation, Vanessa said quietly, it is over. Nia turned from the window and met her eyes. If I send an honest recommendation, she said, then the board gets the truth before more people build plans on a lie. Vanessa inhaled slowly, as if even breathing had become something to negotiate. Richard will say you made this personal. Nia's expression did not change. Richard made it personal when he let arrogance travel ahead of ethics. The words landed with such calm precision that Vanessa could not dodge them, only absorb them. She looked down at her hands. The diamond ring no longer looked like status. It looked expensive and irrelevant. Across the aisle, the businessman finally spoke for the first time, his voice careful and low. Dr. Carter, he said, for what it is worth, some of us have been watching this from the beginning. Vanessa went still. He continued, not cruelly, not dramatically, just clearly. You have shown more professionalism in this row than most executives manage in a boardroom. Then he opened his laptop again, not as a retreat, but as if the matter had already been decided. Vanessa closed her eyes. That did it. Not because he had power over her, but because he had no reason to help Nia and did anyway. Social gravity had fully shifted. The cabin knew it. Vanessa knew it. Even the flight attendant seemed to know it when she returned, placed Nia's fresh coffee on the tray with both hands, and addressed her with quiet respect. Captain says we begin descent in 30 minutes, Dr. Carter. Nia thanked her, then picked up her phone. One motion, one breath, one decision waiting at the edge of her thumb. Vanessa turned toward her, all polish gone now. Please, she said, and it was the first real apology-shaped word she had managed all day, even if it arrived too late to be called grace. Nia looked at her for a long moment. Then she unlocked the screen, opened the board thread, and began to type. Vanessa did not try to read it. She watched Nia's face instead, searching for mercy, for anger, for anything. But what she found was something far more terrifying to people like Richard Whitmore. Judgment without noise. When Nia finished, she read the message once, made one small edit, and hit send. Her phone chimed almost instantly with 3 replies. Received. Understood. Proceeding. Vanessa's lips parted, but no sound came out. Nia set the phone down beside the untouched folder and turned back to the window as clouds opened beneath the wing like white glass. Then, without looking at Vanessa, she said the one line that left the entire row in silence. I did not recommend denial. Vanessa blinked, hope flashing across her face so suddenly it almost hurt to see. Then Nia lifted her coffee, took one measured sip, and finished. I recommended a full ethics review, a suspension of accelerated approval, and an immediate investigation into unauthorized financial commitments made before board clearance. By the time we land, your husband will not be trying to close Eastbridge. He will be trying to keep his seat.